Okay. Every time I read an article from Rabbi Taub, I experience a sort of paradigm shift, a change, epiphany. I discover something. And now we're going to begin a new year. Chai Elul, from today until Rosh Hashanah, there are 12 days, each day corresponding to 1 month of the year. And today, the 18th of Elul, corresponds to the first month of the year. And we're able to channel ourselves to prepare for the bracha of the new year. So it's really, really amazing that we have Rabbi Taub with us tonight, who speaks all over the world, all kinds of audiences, on a rainbow of topics. And it's going to inspire us and invigorate us with new vitality and Shais.
Rabbi Yoey Muchnick, our musical coordinator and director, Nagina, pen of the soul, is very, very important in Hasidic life. I also personally want to express, this is obviously not a prepared statement because I didn't know that I was going to hear this until I got here. But the story that we heard from Rabbi Shmuel and his family is absolutely astounding. And Baruch Hashem, Hashem is good. Rabbi Shmuel's family and community and all of us, amidst all Klal Yisrael and the whole world, should continue to experience revealed and open miracles from Hashem.
Amen.
I also especially liked that we had the medical verification that it actually was indeed a miracle. That's very important. It says in Gemara, it's a very strange Gemara, Toiv shebereifim lagahenim, that the good doctors, imagine what it says about the bad ones, but it says Toiv shebereifim, the good doctors, the best of them, the most toiv of the doctors, lagahenim, they go to hell. So what does this mean? It's a very strange Gemara. But one explanation is, what's toiv? Toiv is Tes Vav Bais. Tes is 9, Vav is 6, Bais is 2. So 9 plus 6 plus 2 is 17. Okay. 3 times a day, a Jewish person davens the Amidah, which is also known as the Shemoneh Esrei, because of the 18 brachas. 18 brachas where we express our need for Hashem's blessings in our life. That we depend on Hashem. 18 blessings. There could be a doctor who says, oh, you know what? When I come to Reifei Cholim, where Hashem heals the sick, I don't need that bracha because I myself am a healer. I'll do that one. Hashem, I got this one. I only need 17 brachas. So that's Toiv, the Gematria 17. We hear from a doctor who comes and stands before us tonight and says, this wasn't from anything that a human being could have done. This is an open miracle. This is from Hashem. This is only from heaven. So let that be a lesson to us, whether it's in healing or in our family lives or in making a livelihood. Whatever blessings we need in life, we're totally 100% dependent on Hashem. We never ever say, Hashem, don't worry, we got this one. We can cover this, we can handle this ourselves with human power. No such thing. We rely on His blessings. Baruch Hashem. Hashem is good. He bestows blessings. So tonight is a Farbrengen in honor of the birthdays, plural, of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. What was the Baal Shem Tov's main message to the Jewish people? You know, a politician who runs for office, they have to have their talking points, right? They have to have the buzzword, the sound bite, the clip. was the Baal Shem Tov's main teaching? If you could sum it all up. The Baal Shem Tov taught many things. But what was the main teaching? Also, think to yourself, historically for a moment, contextualize when the Baal Shem Tov appeared upon the scene. It was a time of great crisis. It was a time when many Jews felt disenfranchised. They didn't feel part of their own Judaism. It was a time where there was great poverty, great persecution, pogroms. So there were material pressures, and there were spiritual disappointments. And it was really a crisis moment. If you look through Jewish history, there are certain bottleneck moments where it's miraculous that the Jewish people made it again through another one of those precarious moments where, by all rights, by all natural means, any other ancient nation would have disappeared from the world. And if you can pinpoint one of those crisis moments where, without a miracle, we would have gone the way of all the other ancient nations. 300 years ago, the times of the Baal Shem Tov was definitely one of those times. And the Baal Shem Tov came to the world, and he shared with us one simple, powerful message. Every single Jew is beloved to Hashem like an only child born to his parents in their old age. The Baal Shem Tov's message was the power of the individual. We're coming up to Rosh Hashanah. Just 12 days from Chai Elul is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is an interesting Yom Tov. The Rebbe speaks about this in a Michtav Klali, in a public letter in honor of Rosh Hashanah, that if you look at all the Jewish holidays, all the Jewish holidays on the calendar, they all have something to do with a uniquely Jewish event. So for instance, Pesach is the Jews went out of slavery. Or Shavuos, the Jews stood at Sinai and received the Torah. Or even Sukkot, the Jews were protected with clouds of glory in the wilderness. Rosh Hashanah is not uniquely Jewish in what it commemorates. What does it commemorate? It's an anniversary. The anniversary of what? Creation. But more specifically, out of the 6 days of creation, which one of the 6? Day 6. The 6th day, which was the creation of Adam Arishon. That's right. And Adam is the father of all mankind. The Jewish people don't have more of a stake in Adam than the rest of humanity. Everyone is from Adam. So really, Rosh Hashanah is a very universal holiday, something that applies to everyone. And in fact, we see this in the Machzer, in the prayers of Rosh Hashanah. Some of the things that it talks about there is how Hashem is judging, not just the Jewish people, but he's judging every created being. He's judging every animal. He's judging every blade of grass. Hashem is looking at the entire creation. So there's definitely this theme of Rosh Hashanah being something very universal, very grand, very big, containing multitudes. And yet, the Rebbe points out, the symbol and the mitzvah of the day of Rosh Hashanah is shofar. Shofar is an interesting instrument. Shofar is a one-note instrument. You can't get a lot of versatility out of a shofar. And, you can break it up, the length, the duration of the notes, which we do with the Trua and the Shvarim. But it's a one-note instrument. Then, to top it all off, when we have the shofar, we only have one at a time. It's a solo. Shofar solo. There's no such thing as a symphony of shofars. In fact, according to halacha, the reason that the bracha says, Lishmaya koil shofar, not koilois or koiloi shofar, not the plural but the singular, is because you can only do the mitzvah if you have one pure, unmixed sound, just one shofar at a time. That's it. So the Rebbe asks a question. If Rosh Hashanah represents a day that is significant to the entire cosmos, to the entire universe, to every human being, you would think there'd be some type of a mitzvah that would symbolize that would illustrate that something that had multitudes to it. And yet, it's just this one note instrument playing all by itself, without any accompaniment. How do you explain that? You know, one of the, I'd say, hallmarks of chassidus, especially chassidus Chabad, is that the question is the answer. Confusion is clarity. Yeah, my favorite illustration of this principle, by the way, is Jonathan Sachs says that the Lubavitcher Rebbe changed my entire life without saying or writing a single word. The Lubavitcher Rebbe changed my life without saying or writing a single word. This is when Jonathan Sachs was being offered to be chief rabbi of Great Britain. So he wasn't sure if he should do it. So he writes to the Rebbe, and he writes a question: should I become the next chief rabbi of Great Britain? He says the Rebbe takes Jonathan Sachs' own letter, takes the pen, circles should, circles I, makes arrows transposing the two words to flip them, takes the question mark and slashes out the squiggly part, leaves just the dot, so now it's a period, and sends it back to Jonathan Sachs, and it reads, I should become the next chief rabbi of Great Britain. Very simple. That's it. There you go. But that's chassidus. Chassidus always says, if you have a question, if you're confused, look deeper, because that itself is going to reveal new information. It's always confusion that precedes clarity, because clarity is actually born from the confusion. It's the yisna oir min ha-choshech. It's when darkness becomes light. It's a very Hasidic concept. So we're asking a question. Hold on a second. I thought Rosh Hashanah is the day when Adam Harishon was created, which pertains to all humanity. Then why is Rosh Hashanah symbolized by this one note, one single little instrument? And the answer is, yeah, precisely because Rosh Hashanah is the day when one person was created who was the father of the entire world. In fact, not only was Adam Harishon the father of the entire world, for a time, for a few hours, he was the entire world. He was the entire population of the planet. And what does this teach us? This is a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Lama nivra adam yachidi. Why was man created as one? The other species of animals, they were created in groups. Why was man created as a singular being? And not only as a singular being, but even male and female were first created as one. You know that Adam was not man. Ish is man. Adam means from the Adama. He was the earthling. And he was both male and female. And then Hashem split the masculine side and the feminine side, which, by the way, was the first recorded case in history of the splitting of the atom. No, that wasn't good. Okay, hold on. Let me just make a note. Okay. By the way, after the Farbrengen, I'm going up to the comedy store. I'm going to try that line. Okay. It's open mic. Yeah. Okay, I will not say that joke again in L.A. But the point is that what do you have? How do you start creation? With one person who is an entire world. One person is a world. There was a man who he was a workaholic. Couldn't stop working. And even when he came home, he had a home office. And he didn't have time for his family because he was working, he was doing important things. So he was sitting in his office at home, and his little 8-year-old son came running over. He says, "Daddy, will you play with me?" He didn't want to play with the son, so he's trying to figure out how to distract the kid without being mean. So he's looking around. He saw on his desk a magazine. And on the cover of the magazine, there was a picture of the world, with all the continents and all the countries, all the borders. So the man tore the cover of the magazine off, and then he started tearing it into about 50 different pieces, tiny little pieces like this big each. Then he takes the torn up magazine with the picture of the world, and he places it into the hands of this little 8-year-old boy. And he says, "A puzzle. I made you a puzzle. Go finish the puzzle, and then come show Daddy, and then I'll play with you." He figures this is going to get rid of the kid for a while, because a little 8-year-old kid, he doesn't know geography, he doesn't know what the continents look like, much less the countries and their borders and boundaries. So the little boy runs out with the torn up magazine cover with the globe, and he runs into the other room, and the father keeps working. About 5 minutes later, the boy comes running back in. He says, "Daddy, I finished." Father says, No, it's not possible." The little boy says, "Yeah, I did. Come look." So they walk into the other room, and the little boy shows his father. There's the magazine cover completely put back together, every single piece in place. So the father can't understand. Father can't understand how the son was able to do this. So he says, "How did you do this?" Not that I thought it would take a super long time or anything like that, right? But how did you do it? So the little boy says, "Daddy, I don't know what that picture was that was on the front of that magazine. I mean, I know it's the world, but I don't know what that looks like. But I noticed that on the inside cover, on a magazine you have the front cover, but then you have the inside cover. On the inside cover there was an advertisement. There was a picture of a man. I don't know what the world looks like, but I know what a man looks like. So see, Daddy, this is what I did. See each piece on the back, there's another little piece of the man. So that's what I did. I put the picture together using the backs of the pieces, and when you put the man together, the whole world comes into place." This was the primary teaching of the Baal Shem Tov at a time of crisis, at a time when we needed a life-saving message. What did the Baal Shem Tov come to teach us? He taught us the power of the individual. He taught us that every single person is a world. I once read an article about, it's not a very pleasant topic, but up in San Francisco, they have the Golden Gate Bridge, and a lot of people jump from the bridge. So there was an article where they interviewed the medical examiner from the San Francisco Police Department, a psychologist named Jerome Matto. So he was responsible for dealing with the forensics from all the jumpers from the Golden Gate Bridge. So he says, after a while, you get used to it. He says, but there's one story that happened to me 20 years ago. and I can't shake it. Can never forget it. This is the one story that got to me. It really, really got to me. He says there was a jumper. Eventually we were able to ID him. We figured out where he had lived. So we went back to his apartment, and it was a one-bedroom apartment. He was living there alone. And I go into the bedroom, and there's a dresser. On the dresser, there's a piece of paper. And, this is what I'm trained for. I look for notes. So this is probably his note. I walk over and I see the piece of paper. It doesn't say much on it. Most notes say a little bit more. Just says one sentence. I'm going to the bridge now. If on my walk there, one person stops and says hello to me, I will turn around and come home. He says all the years, all the cases he saw, that was the one he couldn't shake. They say that to the world you may be one person, but to one person you may be the world. If one person would have said good evening to that man walking to the bridge that night, he would have been that man's world, and maybe he would have never even known it. Probably wouldn't have. But he would have been a world, and he would have saved the world, because anyone who saves one soul saves a world. We have the problem that we know how vast the universe is, and we became so tiny that we start to think that we are insignificant. Chassidus comes and tells us the opposite. You are not insignificant. You are infinitely significant. If Hashem is so great and big, that doesn't just mean that nothing is too big for Hashem. That means that nothing is too small for Hashem either. There was a guy who once said, Hashem, is it true that to you, 1 minute for you is like 1,000 years for us? Hashem says, yeah, basically, yeah, more or less. He says, Hashem, is it true that for you a penny is like $1 million for us? Hashem says, yeah, more or less, basically. So the guy says, perfect, Hashem, give me a penny. So Hashem says, sure, in 1 minute. So the joke is that Hashem is so big and so vast and so great, right? And we're so tiny. But actually, that is not an accurate understanding of the concept of Ein Sof, infinity. Infinity doesn't just go one way, right? Lamayla mayla adin ketz, ulamata mata adin tachlis. The Eibishter isn't just the one for whom nothing is too great. He's the one for whom nothing is too small. That means not only to Hashem is every galaxy a molecule, but every molecule is a galaxy. That means that each one of us is a universe. And each one of us has a power, a koyach, to change an entire world. And how do we do it? The environmentalists say, think globally, act locally, right? You know the story in the old days when communism first came to Russia. They used to have guys going around indoctrinating the masses. So this communist, it was sort of like a maggid, but not a religious preacher, a communist preacher. So he went to this small town. He was explaining the Communist Manifesto, Marxism. And he gets up and he explains communism, and he sees this little farmer in the back. And he says, comrade, I want to see if you understand communism. If you have 2 cows, what do? So the little farmer says, if I have 2 cows, I keep 1 cow, and then I give 1 cow to the Communist Party. So the communist says, that's very good. Okay, now, let's say you have 2 goats. What do you do? He says, if I have 2 goats, what do? I keep 1 goat, and I give 1 goat to the Communist Party. Communist says, that's very good. Now let me ask you another question. Let's say you have 2 chickens. What do? The little farmer pauses. Comrade, 2 chickens. The farmer is pausing. He won't open his mouth. The communist says, 2 chickens, comrade, 2 chickens. He's having his own. He says, comrade, I don't understand. If you had 2 cows, you're ready to give away a cow. If you had 2 goats, you're ready to give away a goat. Now 2 little chickens, and now you're nervous, you're not ready to give away a chicken? What's the difference? He says, yeah, but you know the difference? I actually have 2 chickens. He never had a cow, he never had a goat, give them away, no problem. But now you ask for the chicken, now you're getting personal. Comes chassidus and explains, it's not just we want you to give something small because that's more manageable. It's not a practical thing. Oh, so start with something small, so you won't, sometimes a person is coming to Yiddishkeit, and they never kept a shabbos, so it's overwhelming to them. So you say start with a Friday night, and then gradually you add on. So there's such a concept. You take it little by little, and practically speaking, you add on 1 bit at a time. So that's one way of touching it up as a practical thing. But chassidus explains it much more powerfully than that. Chassidus explains that every single act, even if it happens 1 time, is not just a little act, and it didn't just occur for a little moment. It's a humongous, gigantic, world-encompassing, in fact, infinitely big act, which exists lamaila in the spiritual realms for an infinite, eternal amount of time. So there's no such thing as a small act. When we say, you want to make a change? You want to transform your life? Okay, so start saying Alamichya from a siddur. We say, that's trivial. It's not trivial. That's world-changingly massive. It's infinitely big. Nothing is small. So I'll tell you a story. It's okay to tell a story?
Tell me a story.
Tell a story. You remind me of the guy who calls up the KGB back in the Soviet Union, and he says, is this the KGB? They said, yeah. He says, tell me a joke. So they say, okay, what's your address? So he tells them the address. 5 minutes later, boom, boom, boom. They go and knock the door down, they grab the guy, take him to the KGB headquarters. They sentence him to 10 years in Siberia. That's it. They send him off. 10 years in Siberia. Okay. 10 years forced labor in a gulag. And then he gets out. He comes home. First day of freedom, back in his old apartment. Picks up the phone. He dials. Hello? Is this the KGB? They say, yeah. He says, tell me a joke. They say, sure. What's your address? He says, no, I already know that joke. Okay, so, can I tell you a story? Okay, tell you a story. Here's what we're going to do. I'll tell you a story in a minute. We have a very special nigun, which is extremely appropriate to tonight because it's a bridge between the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. It's called the nigun Shalosh Tnuos, the melody of 3 movements. The first movement is from the Baal Shem Tov. The second is from the Maggid, who was Baal Shem Tov's primary disciple and successor. And the third movement is from the Alter Rebbe, who was the primary disciple and successor of the Maggid. So we're going to hear the Shalosh Tnuos. We're going to get into the spirit and be transported through the pen of the soul.
Please join me.
By the way, in case you didn't figure out how it works yet, the opportune time for grabbing more food is during the Nigun. Since I said something like that minimizes the power of Nigunim, I actually want to set the record straight. A Nigun is not a small thing. Well, I had already said nothing's a small thing. There's a teaching from the Maggid, the Mezritcha Maggid, based on a Mishnah in Shabbos. Now the Mishnah in Shabbos is talking about carrying on Shabbos, specifically as it pertains to domesticated animals. So if you have an animal that has a leash, may it be led by a leash on Shabbos. So the Mishnah says, Kol Balei Shir, Shir Shin Yud Reish in Mishnaic Hebrew means a leash or a chain. All those who possess a leash, Yoitzim B'Shir, they may go out with their leash. V'nimshachim B'Shir, they may be drawn along by their leash. But the Maggid taught it like this. Shin Yud Reish in biblical Hebrew, like Shiru Lashem Shir Chodosh, Shir means a song. So the Maggid taught it like this. Kol Balei Shir, all those who possess a song. the souls and the angels who serve Hashem through singing song. Yoitzim b'shir, they go out, they leave behind their own separate selfhood as created beings with a song. They sing a song of ecstasy that causes them to expire and to become subsumed in the one. But then when they remember that their duty is to serve Hashem as created beings, nimshachim b'shir, they do a U-turn, they're drawn back into their selfhood with a song of hisyashvus, of settling. Well, there was a chassid who probably didn't study how to speak to a hostile audience, and he rolled into the town of Shklov. You're familiar with the town of Shklov? Shklov, yes, Shklov. Shklov was a bastion of Torah scholarship, and just as much a bastion of opposition to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. And so this chassid rolls into Shklov, and the locals say, "Hey, tell us a vort." So he says, "Sure. Kol bali shir." That's a mishnah. It's a regular thing, right? Animals with leashes, Shabbos. But he says, "Kol bali shir," those who possess a song. That means the angels, the souls who sing songs of ecstasy, and they leave their selfhood. Yotzim b'shir, they abandon their selfhood with a song. And Shachar b'shir, they're drawn back into their selfhood with another song. The locals in Shklov heard this, and this became the big joke. Everyone WhatsApped this to everyone. Within 1 minute, everyone put it on Facebook. It was just the town joke. This silly teaching that these chassidim are going around saying. The Alter Rebbe was unique among the Talmidim of the Maggid in that he was Shnei Or. His name was Shner Zalman, which is Shnei Or, two lights. The light of chassidus, Pnimius HaTorah, and the light of Nigla, of the revealed Torah, the legalistic. That's why also we refer to the Alter Rebbe as the Baal HaTanya, and also Baal HaShulchan Aruch. Two seminal works, one in Nister and one in Nigla. And that's because the Alter Rebbe was Shnei Or, two lights. So the Alter Rebbe, just as much as he was a teacher of chassidus, he was as well a genius in the legalistic areas of Torah. So he used to be the student of the Maggid that would go and represent the chassidim to their opponents, who thought of the chassidim as being unlettered. Now, there was a certain reputation that Chassidim had, that they were not learned, or that they disregarded or lacked respect for Torah scholarship. So the Alter Rebbe was the biggest proof that that's not true at all. And they used to send him, and he would stand his ground, and he would always emerge with a reputation, even amongst those who were the biggest opponents of Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe would always emerge with a reputation that he was a real scholar, a real genius. So, happened to be the Alter Rebbe on one of his travels before he was Rebbe, came to the town of Shklov. And somebody recognized him, and they started murmuring, and they said, they called him the Lozhnya Maggid, the preacher of Lozhnya. And they said the preacher from Lozhnya, the student of the Maggid, was here, and they swarmed him. And they started asking him, "No, tell us a word, tell us some Torah." Now, some people wanted to hear, or they actually wanted to hear Dvar Torah from the Alter Rebbe. Other people just wanted a chance to ridicule. But with whatever motivation people had, it was a big excitement. So the Alter Rebbe says to them, you know what, this is not the way to do it. You don't do it this way. You don't come swarm a person as he enters town. Tonight, you'll convene a meeting, invite whoever wants to come, and they can ask whatever they want to ask, and I'll stand up in front of the shul, and I'll give a proper shiur. But I'm not going to do it like this. So they said, fine, no problem. Shklov started buzzing, because they heard that the student of the Maggid, who was the big genius, Talmudic and halachic genius, had come to town. And so again, half the people wanted to come out because they really wanted to hear what he had to say. The other half came out because they wanted to trip him up and they wanted to expose some lack of knowledge or even ridicule some teaching of the Alter Rebbe. Whatever the motivation, the shul, it was called the cold shul in Shklov, it was packed to the rafters, literally people standing in the windows. And the anticipation, the electricity was palpable in the air. The Alter Rebbe, he's going to get up, he's going to give a shiur. And he comes to the bima. And he stands at the bima. He sees the whole crowd there, waiting for what is he going to say. And he says, well, let me ask you, if you were in Shklov, at that place, at that time, in that setting, within the context that I just described to you, what words would be the most incendiary words that you could start to open your Torah class? How could you start a riot in Shklov? You know all you would have to say? Exactly what the Alter Rebbe said. He got up there in front of everyone and he said, Kol Balei Shir, the possessors of a song, the souls of the angels, sing a song of praise to Hashem. Yoitzim B'shir, they leave in ecstasy, they leave behind their selfhood, become subsumed in the one. V'nimshachim B'shir, but then they're drawn back down, they return to their selfhood through another song. You have questions? I'll answer your questions. But first, we're going to sing a song. And the Alter Rebbe began to sing a nigun, which is known as the Nigun Matan Torah. Don't ask me what it sounds like, we don't know. How do we know this story? We know this story because one of the geniuses of Shklov, one of the local Talmidei Chachamim, who was named Yosef Kolbai. You know why they called Rabbi Yosef Kolbai? Kolbai, everything was in him. He was an encyclopedia. He was a Google of Torah knowledge. He knew everything. Absolute bekias, every letter, every word. So this Yosef Kolbai, he says, he remembers the Alter Rebbe got up, and the people didn't know what hit them. He says, you have questions, we can answer questions, but first we're going to sing a song. And the Alter Rebbe starts singing a song. So he says, as the Alter Rebbe is singing his song, what happens? He says, I came that night with my question. A very challenging question, a question, in fact, that I had posed to the greatest scholars here in Shklov, as well as in Vilna and Slutsk. And nobody could answer this question. This was a real bombshell question. He said, as the Alter Rebbe was singing, the room was lifted. The room, everyone in the room was lifted. He said, we all were taken to another place. He said, on that level where I was standing, everything became clear. the knots in my brain started to unravel and loosen. And every confusion I had in Torah became absolute clarity. And after the Alter Rebbe finished, there were no more questions. A nigun in Chabad is not just you sit at the Farbrengen, the Mashpia talks, and eventually you get bored of listening to someone talk. It's a musical interlude, right? It gives you a little break. Or it's a chance to come up and take more food. Music in general is very aesthetically pleasing. That's why people generally like music, because it sounds nice. It's pleasant to listen to. But nigina, musical communication in Chabad, and I call it decidedly musical communication, is not a break from the message. It's actually taking the message to a higher level. When we've said what we can say with words, then the nigun comes in, and with music, we can express ideas sometimes more deeply even than with words. So even a nigun in Chabad, is chokhmah bina das, is intellectual. It's not just listen to a sweet song and be emotionally enthralled with the beauty of it. That's regular music. A nigun in Chabad is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. That by listening to the music, you become more intelligent. Your brain becomes sharpened. And life becomes more clear. Okay, we got to hear a nigun from the Alter Rebbe. Do you know Keliapa? Yeah?
Rabbi, how about all you need is glove?
said earlier, Chaim. I said earlier that I was going to tell you a story. And you say, yeah, you did tell us a story. But that wasn't it. You know, Groucho Marx. Groucho Marx was once at a party, particularly dull party. And after he left, he said to the host, I had a wonderful time. This wasn't it. So I wanted to tell you a story, but the one that I told you wasn't the one that I had in mind. The story that I wanted to tell you was when we were talking about the Baal Shem Tov's message. Do you remember the Baal Shem Tov's message? Yeah? What's the Baal Shem Tov's message? One person is a whole world, that's right. Somebody was listening, all the way in the back.
Every Jew is beloved to Hashem like an only child, born from his parents in old age.
You're reading from notes, that's very good. It's a whole other level. I have chayzrim here. Baruch Hashem. So I want to tell you a story about that. The Baal Shem Tov had a son-in-law named Rabbi Yechiel. And he had a nickname. They didn't call him Yechiel, they called him Gerdeitchel, which means the little German, because the Baal Shem Tov lived in Mezhebush, which is in Poland. And Yechiel was a German Jew, a Yakin. You know the Yakis? There was once a Yakin. He told his wife, he says, I'm going out to shul now for Ma'ariv. I want you to know I'm going to be home a little bit later for dinner because tonight's the night we switch from the same bracha to the same talumot levracha. So I'm going to be a little bit later from Ma'ariv. Right. The Yakins, you know the Yakins. What happens when a Yakin marries a Lubavitcher? The chassidus starts exactly 2 hours later. So, Yechiel, they called him Der Deitchel. In fact, his last name, not that Jews use last name so much back then, was Ashkenazi, which again means the German Jew. So, Rabbi Yechiel, the whole story how he ended up in Poland and found chassidus itself is remarkable. And just to give you the gist of it, he was one of 4 brothers. And their father gave each one of them a certain amount of money one day. And he told each of them to go out into the world and come back in 5 years and show me what you've made of yourself. So each brother went out with this certain amount of money, and they went out for 5 years. Yechiel found his way to Poland, and he found the Baal Shem Tov, and he became the Baal Shem Tov's disciple, and then he became the Baal Shem Tov's son-in-law. The 5 years were coming to an end, and he needed to go back to his father's home to show his father what he'd made of himself. So it was summertime. And Yechiel came to the Baal Shem Tov in Yechidus, the Baal Shem Tov's room, and he said that he needs to go back to Germany to his father, now that the 5 years are coming to an end. And he wants a bracha for the trip. And the Baal Shem Tov gave him a bracha for the trip. Then he said, being that it was summertime, he'd calculated how much time it would take to get there and back, that if everything went smoothly, he could be back in Mezhebush for Rosh Hashanah. So Rabbi Yechiel then asked for a second bracha, that the Baal Shem Tov should bench him, they should be together with his Rebbe, with the Baal Shem Tov for Rosh Hashanah. And the Baal Shem Tov told Yechiel, bring a shofar. He didn't give him a bracha that he's going to be back in time. In fact, he implied very much the opposite. He said, bring a shofar, which means probably he's not going to be in Mezhebush for Rosh Hashanah. At any rate, he takes the trip and gets back home. And there's a whole long story of what happened there. Actually, the father made a feast. And he invited all of the rabbis from the town. And each of the brothers were supposed to get up and say Dvar Torah. And Yechiel declined his turn to get up and speak. He didn't really think it was necessary. Baal Shem Tov, one of the things chassidus teaches is humility. He didn't really think it was important to get up and show off. What he was doing, though, is he was eating. Actually, he was eating a lot. And he was, in his mind, he was being meyachid yechudim, like the way that the Baal Shem Tov had taught him. See, according to chassidus, Gashmias, all physicality, has a spark of holiness within it. And when you know how to use it the proper way, you elevate that godly spark. And it's a very powerful thing. In fact, just if I could pause the story for a moment, I'll share with you a word from the Rebbe's father. The Rebbe's father said that kosher, the word kosher, is spelled Chav Shin Reish, which is the Rosh Hashanah, the acronym Kemeitze Sholol Rav, like one who discovers a great treasure. What does that mean? It means that when you deal with physical things, with food, you can get pulled into them and then it can become a degrading experience. But if you know how to sanctify it and use the physicality for the sake of heaven, then actually you get that spark, that godly spark, that's in the physical thing that enlivens it, and you disencumber the spark and refine the world. So that's the hidden treasure. So by eating kosher and eating with a kavanah and with an intention and unleashing the sparks, that's like finding a hidden treasure in the food. At any rate, that's a basic Hasidic concept. That's what Yechiel was doing. He was eating and he was unleashing sparks. Except nobody saw that. They just saw that he was a fresser. So at the end of the evening, Yechiel's father came over and says, Yechiel, you embarrassed me. Your brothers got up, they all said Divrei Torah, and you didn't say anything, and you were just fressing. So he says, Father, I didn't know that disappointed you. I'll tell you what, make a party tomorrow night, and I'll impress you. So he made another party the second night, just as lavish as the first. And each of the brothers were supposed to get up and say a Dvar Torah. So Yechiel, this time, he figures, okay, this is what his father wants. He got up, and each brother who got up to the podium to speak, Yechiel would walk over, and he would pass his hand before the brother's forehead, and the brother would go into a trance. And instead of saying the words that he prepared, he would have to speak his truth. However ugly that truth really was. And each brother sort of realized, I'm not on a therapist's couch over here. I'm standing in front of the entire town, and stopped and sat down quietly. And one by one, each one got up and they did this. And apparently, Rabbi Yechiel knew what his father would like, because his father thought that was a pretty cool trick. And then Yechiel got up and he taught a little Torah about refining the sparks. At any rate, the father was happy. He said, Yechiel, you've proven yourself. You made a mention of yourself. Very good. Go back to your Rebbe, your father-in-law, and be safe. So he says, great. And he starts booking it because, remember, he calculated if everything goes smoothly, right? Every time you calculate, did everything go smoothly? What always happens, right? So he's rushing back. He's going to make it to Mezhebush for Rosh Hashanah. And on the way, he gets into a traffic jam on the 405. But no, that's a mashal. For he was kidnapped by slave traders. And no, that's what actually happened. He was kidnapped by slave traders. And these were people, they were human traffickers. So they kidnapped him, and they took him off the mainland, and they took him to a sea. I'm not even sure which sea it was. And they put him on a boat, and they were going to sell him into slavery. At any rate, a big storm came, and the boat capsized. And Yechiel swam to safety. And he made it to an island where nobody lived, or at least he didn't think anyone lived. You're going to see in the story. So he made it to this island. And he calculates that it's Erev Rosh Hashanah. It's mamash, it's the day before Rosh Hashanah. This evening is Rosh Hashanah. And he realizes how wise and how prophetic the words of his father-in-law, his Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, were when he told him to bring a shofar, because he had with him, he had his shofar. Okay, so it's Erev Yom Tov. He's got to get ready for Yom Tov. So first of all, you got to toivel. So how do you toivel? He's on an island. He's surrounded by the ocean, right? So jumps in the water, he jumps out. Then he's davening, davens. Then comes the next morning, davens some more, Tekiyah shofar, does Tekiyahs. He doesn't know this, but there's a crowd gathering up over the ridge. A bunch of locals who are watching this really strange sight. Here's this stranger, came to their island, all by himself. He jumps in the water, he jumps out of the water, he screams at the sky, he toots on a ram's horn, and he cries. He's a Meshuggah. So the locals were talking, who's going to go, get the big butterfly net? Who's going to go catch this guy? And as they're talking about it, a carriage comes by, it's the king. The island had a king. So the king comes over and says, well, what's going on? Why is there a crowd of people in the middle of the day? They said, well, this weird guy came to the island, he jumps in the water, jumps out, he screams at the sky, he cries, he toots on a ram's horn. He's crazy. The king was a little bit more educated than the rest of his subjects. He had learned things beyond his little island. So he says, no, he's not crazy. He's just a Jew. So I'll go. Go, and in fact, I read about Jews. I never met Jews. I would love to meet a Jew. So go down and tell him to come meet me in the palace. So they walk down, and they meet him. They're scared, but then they realize he's a normal guy. And they say, the king wants to see you in the palace. So he says, I can't. Today's my holiday. So they go back. They tell the king, all right, he says today's his holiday. So the king says, fine, tell him to come see me tomorrow. So they come back down to the beach and they say, the king says, come see him tomorrow. He says, tomorrow's also my holiday. It's like asking for time off from work when you have a non-Jewish employer. How many holidays? Right? So they go back to the king and they say, he says, tomorrow's also his holiday. The king's like, oh yeah, I read that also. 2-day Yom Tov. That's right. Okay. Listen, tell him whenever his Yom Tov is over, he should just come see me. Okay. So finally, Rosh Hashanah is over. And Yechiel goes to the palace to see the king. And the king says to him, you are the first real live, breathing, in the flesh Jew I've ever met. Fascinating. I read about Jews, but I never met a Jew. I think what this island really needs is a Jewish community. I told you, he never met a Jew. He didn't know. I think what we really need, we could use a Jewish community. He says, what I would like you to do, I spoke with my city planner. I want 400 Jews. That's what we figured out, 400. I want you to bring 400 Jews to this island to live here, to be my subjects. And I'm going to treat them very nicely. So Yechiel says, Your Majesty, I'm going to tell you 2 reasons why your request is not a good request. I'm sorry to say. First is because, who do you think I am? I'm some governor that I can tell Jews where to move and where to relocate? I don't have that power. The Jews are going to live wherever they want to live. I can't send them. He says, but second of all, do you know how Jewish migration patterns in the world really work? You know that we wander all over the world. Since our temple was destroyed, we were in exile. Do you understand? God does that because, all right, I'll explain from the beginning. The world was created, according to the Rizal, that means Rapach. The Tzut says 288 sparks fell into the world from Shviras HaKelim, and there's sparks of godliness that are in all physical things, and a Jew has to come and he uses the physical thing, and then he elevates it, and the sparks go back, and basically wherever there are sparks, that's where there are Jews, and that's why Jews have to wander all over the world. We have to go all over picking up those sparks. So basically it's foolish to ask for 400 Jews to come to your island, because if the sparks were here, then God would see to it. You wouldn't even have to ask for it. The 400 Jews would come to this island even if God had to force them to be dragged here in chains as slaves. But one way or another, they would, even in chains as slaves, they would come here if God wanted them to. But if God doesn't, then it's not going to happen. So the king says, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, for some reason, that makes a lot of sense. You know what? I rescind my request. We're going to arrange for you a boat back to the mainland, and we're going to get you home. So Yechiel gets back home, and he's in Yechidus with the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov looks very, very serious. And he says, Yechiel, this Rosh Hashanah was a particularly difficult Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah, the Baal Shem Tov, being the Nasi, the leader of his generation, of course, was not just davening for himself. Primarily, he was davening for Klal Yisrael. He was looking with the prophetic light all across the world, every situation that would transpire in every Jewish community, what every Jewish community needed. So the Baal Shem Tov says to Yechiel, says, this Rosh Hashanah was particularly difficult because I was going through community by community and I was looking at each place where there are Jews and working on rescinding any negative decrees that were facing the Jewish people. And it was going well. I was able to daven, I was able to remove all of these decrees. But there was one decree that I just couldn't, it's like that stain that you can't clean up. Nothing was working. There was a place on earth where an incredible amount of godly sparks had fallen. They'd been there since creation, since the Shviras HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels. And the problem is that since creation, no Jew ever stepped foot in that place. And in heaven, they were getting restless. When are those sparks going to be disencumbered? When are they going to be refined? When are they going to be uplifted? And they started making a calculation. And they figured out in heaven that in order to refine all of those sparks that were in that particular place, it was an island actually, that 400 Jews were going to be brought as slaves in chains to this island, and they were going to live there with their children and children's children for as many generations as it took to finally, with all of their mitzvahs, refine every last spark in that place. And I just couldn't get that decree to be rescinded. Baal Shem Tov says, Yechiel, but do you know what happened? Before the 48 hours of Rosh Hashanah were concluded, in the very last moments of the 2 days, suddenly the decree had vanished. It was no longer necessary from heaven that 400 Jews be brought in chains as slaves to this island. They said, it's no longer necessary. And I looked, what's the reason? They were so obstinate from heaven not to allow this decree to be rescinded. And now all of a sudden they're telling me it's off the table. So I looked, and I saw that for the first time since the creation of the world, a Jew visited this place. In fact, he spent Rosh Hashanah in this place. And during the course of those 48 hours, during the course of the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, through his prayers and his mitzvahs, one Jew refined all of the sparks that were in this place. And now there will never be a reason for any other Jew to step foot there ever again. There's no sparks left. There's no business there for a Jew. It was all taken care of by one Jew. And do you know who that Jew was, Yechiel? That Jew was you. Baal Shem Tov came to the world and he taught us that each one of us is a world. Each one of us has the power to repair an entire world. I struggle. Did that fun. Caught you off guard. You're a world. You're a musical world.
Yeah.
those who are asking, all of the nigunim tonight are nigunim of the Baal Shem Tov or of the Alter Rebbe. The nigun that we just heard is known as the nigun Yoshan, the old nigun, and it is one of the 10 nigunim that the Alter Rebbe composed. So we spoke quite a bit about the Baal Shem Tov, about the Baal Shem Tov's message. But did we talk about the Alter Rebbe's message? What? I'm just testing if you're paying attention. No, we did not discuss the Alter Rebbe's message. So I mentioned that the Baal Shem Tov's message was that every single Jew is precious. Precious like what? Like an only child born to his parents in their old age. So the Baal Shem Tov's message was really the preciousness of each individual Jew. And that means the way you look at yourself, as well as the way you look at every other Jew. Because remember, every other Jew is also Hashem's only child. We're all only children. That's why a community, a chassidus community, a chassidus shul that follows in the ways of the Baal Shem Tov is a warm and inviting place. It's a place where everybody is welcome, where everybody knows they're respected, where all kinds are able to mix. It's a unique opportunity to be in a shul that follows the ways of the Baal Shem Tov. And I encourage everybody to take advantage of that, and not just to appreciate being in a place where you're welcome, but be the welcomer. Be the person who makes space for another one of Hashem's only children. But what was the Alter Rebbe's message? So we heard before, during the Sudas Haidah, about the message of gratitude, and also how it connects with Parshas Kisaveh. First mitzvah Kisaveh is Bikurim. Bikurim are the first fruits. When a farmer takes his first fruits and gives them as a gift to the Kohen who represents Hashem, that is a gesture of gratitude. He acknowledges that everything is from Hashem. So Bikurim are gratitude. Now, the verse says, Kisaveh el ha'aretz, when you arrive in the land, you're going to start giving Bikurim. But did you know, like just about everything in Judaism, that's a machlekes, what it means, Kisaveh el ha'aretz, when you arrived in the land? Yep. So one opinion is, when you arrive in the land, literally means when you step over the border, or rather, when you step over the Jordan River, and you come into the land, you immediately are obligated to give Bikurim, which means to tell Hashem thank you. Another opinion is no. Kisaveh el ha'aretz, to arrive in the land. Arriving doesn't just mean you stepped foot onto the land. It means you settled. So there were 7 years under Yeshua where they were fighting to conquer the land, and then 7 more years where they were apportioning the land. So it was a 14-year process. And after the 14-year process, according to one opinion in Torah, that's when the obligation to bring Bikurim and say thank you to Hashem began. Now, everything in Torah operates on multiple planes, multiple levels. We mentioned before the Alter Rebbe, it was Shnei Or, two lights, the light of Chassidus and the light of Nigla. They're not really two separate lights. It's one Torah. You know, the Divrei Chayim, the Tzanzer Rav, was a Paisik. He was a Chassidish Rebbe, and he was also a Paisik, a ruler in halacha. And he wrote a lot of responsa, a lot of tshuvas. And he was so prolific that the Tzanzer Rav, when he would be writing the answer to the previous letter, he would simultaneously be reading the next letter. He would read and write at the same exact time in order to produce more of these responsa. And one time, his sons saw him reading a letter and not writing the answer to the previous letter. He was only just focusing on this one letter. So afterwards, his sons asked him why was he focusing on the one letter at a time instead of two. So he said, well, this letter was from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which meant the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek was a contemporary of the Divrei Chayim, of the Tzanzer Rav. So he says to his sons, when the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when the Tzemach Tzedek writes to me about halacha, he's simultaneously holding with me a discussion in Kabbalah, and therefore it was two letters at one time. So whenever we have a legalistic discussion in Torah, it's also a spiritual discussion. So you ask a question, when did the Jews give Bikurim? Right when they entered the land, or 14 years later when they had fought and settled the land? And other than being historically interesting, the question is, what does this matter to me in my individual life? And the Rebbe explains that really these are two levels in your relationship with Hashem. A childish relationship and a mature relationship. What does it mean to have a childish relationship with Hashem? And I don't mean in a negative way. I mean in the best way. There's something pure, there's something precious about a child's love for his father. A child doesn't even understand how his father is any different than all the other fathers in shul. If you would ask him, well, why do you want this father? Maybe there's better fathers, you can go home with them. He says, no, this is Tati. Well, why? What's so good about him? What do you mean, what's so good about him? He's Tati. A little child, all he knows is when he's lost in a crowd and he calls out Tati, he's expecting for a certain face to turn around. He doesn't know who Tati is. He knows nothing about Tati's life. He doesn't know what's unique about Tati. All he knows is this is Tati. Then you have an adult. An adult who understands who his father is, who appreciates what his father did, the sacrifices his father made, who looks up to his father because of the qualities that his father has. Which one is the right way to be with Hashem? Should you have the precious, innocent, pure love of a child? Or should you have the admiration that an adult has toward his father? Which one? Well, both. Just like no matter how old you get, you'll always be your parents' baby. It's always both. See, you get up in the morning and you say, Meidani lefanecha, which means thank you. Is that we have to be big boys and big girls. And we're not allowed any longer to say, what do you want from us, Chassidim? We're simple people. It's enough that we have faith. We believe. The Alter Rebbe said, no, I don't want to hear that you just believe. I want you to explain it. I want you to tell me you understand how it works. If that was what the Alter Rebbe did, then what did the Rebbe do? The Rebbe took the biggest idea, the idea that's so big, so massive, such a paradigm shift, that you can't relate to it. You believe in it. Maimonides says you believe every day that Mashiach is coming. You believe. But to wrap your head around it, it's too much. Came to the Rebbe and said, boys and girls, grow up. I'm taking you into the boardroom, and I'm going to tell you what I see. I'm not telling you Mashiach's coming and you believe it and you rely on me. I'm going to explain to you what I see happening in the world. I'm going to explain to you what we can do to make it happen faster. I'm going to explain to you the mechanics behind it all, so you should be able to explain it to yourself and explain it to others. You should be able to speak about Mashiach intelligently. Do you know how wild that is, to speak about Mashiach intelligently? Using everyday words. So you know somebody doesn't know what they're talking about when they start using the citizen English words, right? It draws down infinite light into this physical plane. You know that Rebbe's brother, Rabbi Bezalel, he once had tea with a chassid, and they were speaking Kabbalah, and they were speaking till 3 a.m. about Seder Ishtalshlus. And he said what was very interesting about the Rebbe's brother was he didn't use the Kabbalistic terms. Zohar has words for all the different levels of Ishtalshlus. There are Aramaic terms from Zohar for these different levels. He said the Rebbe's brother had his own nicknames, his own terminologies for all these spiritual things. And they were going in Seder Ishtalshlus higher and higher and higher and higher. And then finally they came to a level where the Rebbe's brother used the regular term from Zohar. And he says, you know what, I got to stop talking, and now I don't know what I'm talking about, because now I'm using the Zohar's term. Chassidus Chabad Chochma Bina Das means we have a language to describe the undescribable, to speak intelligently about matters of faith. If that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will. Do you understand what a paradox that is? Intelligence, faith. To speak intelligently about matters of faith. And yet, that's what it means to be a grown-up, mature adult Jew. The Alter Rebbe, 7 generations, Yesiyah Chabad, gave us the tools to be adults, to speak about Hashem and life and Torah and Mashiach with words that make sense, everyday, palatable language, until not only the Rebbe sees it, but we see it too. First, we see it in our mind's eye, Ufefen and Diegin, and then we're going to see it in objective reality in front of us. But that's what the Rebbe wants from us, to be grown-ups. Don't worry, you're never going to stop being the beloved, precious, cute little baby to Hashem. Teres Baal Shem Tov remains Teres Baal Shem Tov. We use that when we need to as well. But this last job, this last task, it's going to require grown-up Judaism. We're given the tools. I wish there would be a song from the Alter Rebbe. It would be about a father, about a king, you have something like that? Yeah? tell you a story that happened to me. They say, "Auf a Meise Farbrengen is kein Kashis." Can't ask a question on a story. Why can't you ask a question on a story? Because if you say to them, well, why did it happen that way? Well, if it were fiction, you have a good question. Why didn't I write it differently? But if this is what happened, don't ask me why did it happen that way. That's just how it happened. So the story is like this. I was invited to speak on a panel at a department of comparative religion at a university. And it wasn't a debate. I would not take part in a religious debate, but it was a panel, and they had different world religions represented there. So the moderator, the graduate student who was the moderator, he said, what we're going to do is we're going to ask each one of you, say your name, say your religion, and then very briefly your religion's concept of God. Right? Very briefly your religion's concept of God. No big deal. That's a normal thing to ask someone. In one or two sentences, describe the image. So they go down the line, and they had different religions, and they did it. I mean, they gave their description of God. So they come to me. I was last. Now this is why I say, why was I last? I was last, I'm telling you. I was probably last because I was late. That's probably the truth. Probably why I was last. And I was representing Judaism. You're going to ask, why was I representing Judaism? We picked out of a hat before we came out. It was my hat, so I picked Judaism. So I say, Shais Taub, represent Judaism. And if you want an authentically Jewish answer to a question, an authentically Jewish answer to a question is not an answer, but a question. So I want to ask a question. But before I can ask my question, I need to make an observation. So I'm going to make an observation, then I'm going to ask a question, then you can have my answer. My observation is, I want to be authentically Jewish. So my observation is that every single person on this panel, from all the different religions, said different things about God, but one thing they all said the same about God. They all said that He's a creator. He's a creator. So that was my observation. You all said that God is a creator. That's part of your definition of God. So here's my question. Based on that, would God still be God if He had never created? Because you're saying that one of the things that makes God God is He's a creator. What if He hadn't been a creator? It's not, by the way, a theoretical question. It's a practical question. Because if you believe that God created, creation by definition means it came into being. It didn't used to exist, now it does exist, which means it has a finite beginning. If you believe that God is eternal, which I'm assuming you do, then there was an infinite amount of time before finite time came into existence. So my question was, what was God's status for that infinite amount of time before He was a creator? He wasn't God yet? He was God in training? They didn't have an answer to that. So I told them that according to Judaism, you cannot define God as one who creates. That's something God did, and He does. But that's not His essence. He is whoever He is. I will be who I will be. God has a whole essence that existed long before creation came into being. And if He had never created, He would still be Him. He would still be God. He doesn't need to create. See, I didn't say this part to them because it's not nice, but that's the difference between Judaism and religion. Judaism, they say, what do they say? Philosophy is a bunch of questions that can never be answered, and religion is a bunch of answers that can never be questioned. So which one is Judaism? It's neither, right? We answer our questions, we question our answers. the difference between Judaism and religion is that all religions in the world start with people trying to think, well, what's the meaning of life? And then they come up with some God concept as an answer to why they exist. So God is the answer to a philosophical question. Why do I exist? God is the answer. That's a religion. Judaism is the exact opposite. God is asking a question and we're the answer. God is asking, what's it all about? And he decides to have a relationship. So I asked them, if God didn't need to create, but why did they all say that God needed to create? Because they don't even have a God concept until creation exists. Because their God concept only arises from the problem of explaining why creation is here. Follow the logic? So I said to them, if God didn't need to create, and he would have been every bit as much God if he hadn't, so then why did he? What does the Alter Rebbe say? And the Alter Rebbe is not the first one to say it. It's actually a Medrash Tanchuma, Pashas Nosei. God didn't create because there was a practical reason for it. He created because he had a taiva. How do you properly translate a taiva? A desire, a longing. You could even say lust. Now, taiva gets a bad name because of the kinds of taivas that most of us have. So the word taiva gets a bad name. I was thinking recently, what's the difference between me and Hashem? Hashem had a taiva. He created the world. So he's a Baal taiva, and I'm also a Baal taiva. But then it occurred to me, you know the difference? All of his taivas are l'shem shamayim. But then it occurred to me, hold on, that's not fair. He's shamayim. So when he's selfish, it's beautiful. When I'm selfish, I'm a jerk. Why does he get to be selfish? Because he really exists. His self is a different kind of self. And so when he desires something or longs for it or pines for it or yearns for it, it's not silly. It's important. I don't have to get everything I want. Hashem does. And what does he want? Not need, want. Because, trust me, it's not a need, because needs are practical. That's why if somebody says they need something, you can say to them, well, prove it to me. And if they can't intelligently defend why they need something, it's fair game to say, well, then you don't need it, because you weren't able to articulate why you need it. But what if you desire? I want to paint the walls blue. Well, why? I just want to. Well, if you can't prove it to me, you don't really want to. No, to the contrary. The less I can explain it, the more I want to. See, a need is practical, and therefore, if I can explain it, then I really need it. A desire is the exact opposite. The less I can explain it, the more powerful it is. And we tend to think that a need is more powerful than a desire. It's not true. Needs are very impersonal. Needs are practical. Everyone has needs. Same needs. Needs are very universal. We just polite people don't speak about their needs. But everybody has needs. Desires are personal. Desires are quirky. Desires are idiosyncratic to you. That's why if you want to let somebody get to know you, if you want to let somebody be intimate with you, right? Intimacy is intimacy. How do you let somebody into your inner world? Tell them what you desire. I have this crazy, quirky thing. I want to take a sailboat to Hawaii. And then what happens when they say, well, that's a stupid thing to want. Okay, I will never share anything personal ever again with you. When Hashem wanted to be intimate with us, what did he do? He shared his quirky, weird, idiosyncratic desires. 613 of them. He came down, he told, what does it mean God revealed himself at Sinai? Put on tefillin? Is God revealing himself? No, what it means is the fact that he let you know he cares about something like that, that's God revealing himself. See, if you know my desires, you know me. That's why it's so painful when somebody denies a desire. Somebody tells you, if you tell somebody you need something and then they tell you you don't, that's more of an argument. It's a debate. Okay, so you lost the debate, so you're not as smart as you thought you were. But when you tell somebody you want something, that it matters to you for some quirky reason that it just matters to you, and they tell you, well, that's not good enough, that's silly. What does that mean? What are they rejecting? They're not rejecting your intelligence, they're rejecting you. Desire comes as a makuf. Desire is a noichen. It's not chokhmah, it's kesed. Ratzon is me. When you reject my desire, you reject me. When you embrace my desire, you embrace me. So find out what I like, and then you get to know me. So I was saying before that the Alter Rebbe came and told us to grow up and to become adult children of Hashem. Our relationship with Hashem is multifaceted. Sometimes the relationship is described as Hashem is our Father. But in other contexts, in deeper contexts, it's described as a romance. The deepest level of relationship between Hashem and the Jews is romance. There was a time when Shlomo Melech's Shir HaShirim, when Song of Songs, was not necessarily going to be included in Tanakh. And the other Chachamim were excluding it. Rabbi Akiva said, Chas v'shalom, to exclude Shir HaShirim, because if all the other Svarim of Tanakh are Kodesh, Shir HaShirim is Kodesh HaKadoshim. What does Kodesh HaKadoshim mean? You have the world. That's a circle. Then inside of that you have the land of Israel, where there's a higher degree of holiness. But then there's another concentric circle. There's Yerushalayim, which is an even higher degree of holiness. And then you have the Temple Mount, which is a higher degree of holiness. And then you have the Temple Courtyard. And if you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, peeling off all the layers of the onion, and you get to the epicenter, to the core, what is at the core of the world is Kodesh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies. So Rabbi Akiva said, there are a lot of relationships we have with Hashem. Hashem wears different hats. He's infinite. We're finite, so we describe our relationship with Him in context. And they're all true. He's the judge. He's the lawgiver. He's the provider. And so on and so forth. But if you get to the core, if you get to the deepest level of a Jew, and the deepest level of Hashem, it's Shir HaShirim. It's Ani L'Deidi V'Deidi Li. It's Bosi L'Gani Yachesi Kale. It's a romance. A mature adult says, you know what? I want to get married. I don't need to get married. I'm a grown-up. Someone who needs to get married really should probably hire help. A mature adult says, look, I don't need a wife because practically I need somebody to do things for me. Even emotionally, I'm pretty content and fulfilled. But I have this deep desire to be in a relationship. And it's totally not practical. In fact, it's the most irrational thing in the world. Which is why we say all the time about love, about romance, what do we need it for? And the answer is, you don't. It's much more powerful than anything. It's the expression of your most inner essence. Which, by the way, Hashem implanted in us so that we would be godlike like Him. Remember we mentioned earlier that Lama Nivra Adam Yechidi, that Adam was created as both male and female. And then Hashem split the two. And then He said, get together and become one flesh. You know what that's called? A drekah. You had one, you made two. You had two, He said, become one. Why did Hashem do that to us? That's His story. He was everything, just one. Then He split Himself, so to speak, into creator and creation, the finite and the infinite, the spiritual and the physical. And then what he said to himself, his two sides of himself, like a husband and wife are really two halves of a whole. Hashem said to himself, now, make up, get back together. Well, you had one to begin with. It was all Hashem. Why didn't you leave it alone? You know why? Hashem didn't need to disrupt the oneness. He had a powerful desire, a taiva, a longing, a yearning to experience a relationship. He says, I like you. I'm being vulnerable. I like you. That's why I chose you. Do you like me back? Once a year, Hashem waits to hear if we like him back. Because if you tell Hashem you like him, you know what he does? He has the power to create worlds again for a whole year. But he's only making worlds so that he has a place where to have a relationship with you. It's like if a guy on the day of his wedding gets a text and his kala says, I'm not going to make it, you're dumped. We're not getting married. So at that point, does he want to go to the wedding? You have caterers, and you have musicians, and you have valet parking, and you have coat check. All of it's irrelevant, because it was only there to celebrate his marriage with his wife. So Hashem takes a look at the universe once a year, and he says, all these worlds, spiritual and physical, everything in it, all the multitudes, the entire cosmos, I don't care about this stuff. This stuff is like the valet parking and the band and the caterer, and it's only there if it's in the context of a place for me to have a wedding and then set up a home with my wife. If my wife's not showing up, I don't need a world. So once a year, Hashem says to us, if you like me, then I can do it again. I can go through it all over again. I can make worlds again. I like you, you like me. And at that moment, you know what the moment is? When we tell Hashem, yes, we want you. Yes, we accept you. Yes, we trust you. What's that moment? Shofar. And Hashem hears that shofar and he says, sweetie, you gave me the power, I can do it all over again. I'm making a world again for a year. Because that's the place where you and I get married and set up our home. Now that's chassidus Chabad. An idea like that, that's describing the indescribable. That's giving intelligent words to things that normally only belong in the realm of faith. That's the gift that the Alter Rebbe gave us. That's what mature Judaism sounds like. Can you imagine going into Rosh Hashanah with any other picture of what it means? Some judge with a black gown and gavel, some other silly, preposterous image. Your beloved created a world just to have a place where to romantically court you and marry you and live together with you for eternity. He likes you. Tell him you like him. Today is one of the special days that we have an opportunity to hear a song that we don't hear too often. The Alter Rebbe's Dalet Bovis, which we only sing at very special occasions, like a marriage, or on special days in the calendar. So there's a Nigun Hachana, preparatory Nigun, then the Dalet Bovis, and then, according to custom, we go into the Nejeritz Klotz.
Hare